Welcome to And That's When I Realized, the truth and comedy of midlife with me, Susan Dolci.
And me, Leone Dyer. We are two good friends navigating the twists and turns of that middle part of life, and we are laughing our way through it.
Don't get us wrong, it's not all that funny all the time. There's so much we are unprepared for. Adult children, changing bodies, aging parents. We want you to know that you are not alone in these challenges. So sit back, get a front row seat as we share true life stories with a fresh perspective and just a pinch of irreverence. And That's When I Realized starts now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to And That's When I Realized. I'm Susan Dolci.
And I'm Leone Dyer.
And this is a show where we are tackling the truth and comedy of midlife. Leone and I are best friends who get together almost every Friday. I mean, that's what we aim for.
It's the goal.
Over Zoom. Yeah, over Zoom to share our week, to share the joys and the challenges and the laughs and discuss all those things that friends share. And I'm not sure about you, but we thought that by the time we were in our mid 50s, okay, I can honestly say now it's late 50s, we would, don't tell anybody. We would have kind of had life figured out by now, but it turns out there was a lot we didn't expect, like having to advocate for our aging parents. So today we're discussing the ins and outs of how to best advocate for your parents. Everything from doctor's visits, long-term care, even end-of-life care. So this is kind of a biggie. This can be an emotional topic for a lot of people. So grab your favorite hot beverage and a notepad, because I hope you take some notes, because we've got some real life experiences to share with you that maybe will influence how you deal with advocating for your aging parents. So, Leone.
Yes.
I know that, so my mom passed away about a little more than a year ago. And so I think I was advocating for her for about 5 years with the onset of her dementia and all of that. But, saw that coming, saw what was happening, realized, oh my gosh, I need to get all the legal paperwork in line. I need to do the healthcare power of attorney, a will, all of that. That was like kind of the first step. But to be honest, I was caught off guard for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we look at them as our parents. Mm-hmm. And I never really expected to be the one to have to do this. I'm also the youngest. I have two older brothers, although my oldest brother is also deceased. But I think I just thought, well,
okay, well, he got a pass then.
Yeah, he got a pass. But I guess I always just thought that that wasn't going to fall on me. But it did.
Well, I'm the oldest, so it didn't go to the youngest in my family. Yeah, I wasn't caught off guard. I knew it was coming, only because my parents kind of helped take care of their parents in some form. So it's just like, all right, here it goes. And I'm not the only one doing it. So my brothers and I have kind of split up part of the responsibility, which I highly recommend that, so my youngest brother, right from before I even thought that my parents might need some form of care, my youngest brother was, he knew that we needed to get their financial and legal papers in order. So if something happened, everything, we knew everything. And that was before we started doing any of the medical stuff and really watching and helping them. And they both were fairly, easy peasy.
Well, so, did they give you, was there any pushback from them on you saying, hey, it's maybe time that we have this talk about, legal things, healthcare, power of attorneys, living wills, all of that stuff. Powers of attorney. I said that wrong. Powers of attorney. Okay.
Yeah. I think because my my parents live on a family homestead. And I think that discussion was, I think they were open to that discussion. It's not like we're, they're not getting kicked out of the homestead, but we're just transferring the title. And we're just making sure that your finances are okay. They were open to that. They've actually, I have to say, for my parents, and, knock on wood, because, the next phone call could be, could be proving me wrong. But my parents have been handling the aging process fairly well. And I go into the appointments with them. And, there've been some, in which I think we're going to get into a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about that. Yeah.
But I'm really, hearing other stories from other, my other friends who have aging parents, my parents are not expecting, they didn't expect that we were going to take care of them. So whereas that's happening with one of my friends right now. And that's a really incredible, difficult situation, because she kind of has her feet in the ground. Like, I'm not ready to take care of my parents.
Well, so many of, yes, I was just saying how, so I'll be 58 in February. Leone's she's younger than me, but
just a couple months. Come on.
Same year, but yeah. But I was just, there are a lot of people who are still caring for their elderly parents who still have teenagers at home, or even young children at home. And I can't imagine, like, I had teenagers at the time when I had to start advocating for my mom. But at that point, they were driving themselves. They were pretty self-sufficient. And, beyond me making sure that the laundry was done and dinner was on the table, I didn't feel so much stress of like being in that sandwich sort of space, but so many people are.
Yeah, I did not. My kids were basically grown, for the most part, when I stepped in. However, my brother and his family live with my parents. It's a multi-generational home. So my brother and sister-in-law were kind of dealing with both my parents aging and their kids becoming of age at the same time. So one was progressing, the other two were digressing. But yeah, but I have to, my sister-in-law, when my mother-in-law was in a retirement home, a care, what do they call that? Like where you go for long-term care, or not long-term care. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mother-in-law had a really bad habit. She had two vices. One was smoking, and she was on oxygen. And the second was drinking. And neither of them were allowed in her room or in the center.
Sounds like my mom, except my mom wasn't a smoker, but she was still on oxygen.
Yeah. And so she would try,
and drinking. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she would escape, literally, because they had the doors that locked and you would need the punch code to get out. My mother-in-law figured out what the code was by watching the nurses. And she would get herself out, and no one really watched, because the doors would go open and out would walk this little lady, and no one, I don't think, really was watching. And she would go out around and bum cigarettes off the construction workers that were building a wing on the facility. Or she would have people buy her bottles of wine. But my sister-in-law was raising her children, and she got a phone call from the retirement center asking her to come in, because basically my mother-in-law was in the principal's office. And at the same time she's driving there, she gets a call from her son's middle school principal that he was in the principal's office at the same time. And she's like, I can't do this. I can't. So yeah, it's happening. Yeah, we laugh about it, but I'm not really sure she was at the time.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. I mean, we've kind of got about 9-ish or so tips and other things we want to talk about, but
Yeah.
and one of them is self-care, and we'll get to that
Yeah.
because you can't walk down this road if you don't put the oxygen mask on first.
Mhm.
But one of the reasons I asked about the legal, if you had any legal issues, was that so after my dad died, we had to redo my mom's will, also because she'd moved from Illinois to Ohio. So
Mhm.
stuff doesn't cross state lines like that. I'll have to redo all of it. And so in her healthcare power of attorney, which I didn't anyway, in her healthcare power of attorney, it said that I needed 2 doctors' signatures in order for her to be declared, and this is so hard to say, and it was hard to say it when I was chasing these doctors down, but incompetent. That she was not able to care for her own finances, that I had to make the financial decisions, that I had to make, her healthcare decisions, her living decisions, like where's she going to reside. And so when I moved her into an assisted living facility, this was after, those situations that come up where she put metal in the microwave, like she's putting herself at risk. I mean, there could have been a fire. We went on vacation. I unplugged the stove because I had given her like all these microwave dinners in plastic containers. I'm like, I can't risk her starting a fire. Long story short, when I moved her into the first assisted living community, they didn't blink an eye. Like they didn't even care about having doctor's letters for me to sign all the paperwork. I don't know if they just glazed over it or this just was, I don't know, but I moved her into there with no issue. When I had to move her up here, I had to get 2 doctors' signatures. And one was from her neurologist, who actually started to fight me, saying that he was worried about being sued because he's like, you're trying to declare your mom incompetent, and how I don't know if she is or she isn't. And we had just been in his office. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff, like, oh my gosh, her health and her health insurance premiums she hasn't been paying them. Like, this is how I realized something's wrong. All of these little, and they're not little, they're huge things that are so hard to fix on the back end. Like once something happens, like her health insurance was being mailed to the wrong address, and so it was canceled, and chasing that stuff down, down another doctor and convincing him that I really do love my mom and I really need you to sign this letter so that I can put her in a facility that can take really good care of her. It was, talk about stress. So having your P's and Q's and all of your paperwork in order, and knowing the fine print, understanding all of it before you get yourself into a situation like that is crucial.
And I know with a lot of doctor offices, so if you sign that paper or your parents signed that paper that who has the right to receive information and the financial paperwork and a lot of doctors require that to be updated yearly. So if you did it and you only see the doctor once a year, you may want to, it has to be done every year.
Yeah, that's all the HIPAA stuff. Yeah.
Yep. So this is a great time to take a break. And when we come back, we'll get into tips on how you can avoid some of this frustration that Susan actually had to go through. So this is, oh my gosh, I was going to say 3 things.
And that's what I realized.
And that's right. Oh my gosh, I'm bouncing to your old show. And that's when I realized, and we'll be right back. Hello, welcome back to, and that's when I realized. I am Leone Dyer, and I'm here with Susan, my best friend, and we're talking about how to advocate for your parents. So in the last segment, Susan was talking about the struggles with getting the right paperwork from state to state, doctor to doctor, facility to facility. And
I used to joke around.
Mhm.
And I have it, because I know stuff needs to be shredded, but I had it all in like a reusable grocery bag. You know what I mean? Like all of my
Yeah,
mom's files and everything. And I'm like, this is my mom's life in a bag. And I would
yeah.
literally take this bag with me to every, like, even if we were just going to the doctor, I'd leave it in my car, but it was my mom's life in a bag. So that if anybody asked me for a document or an insurance thing or whatever, I had it.
Well, I have to, that's actually one of the tips coming up, but we'll just let's just jump right into that. That is one of the tips, is to have all the paperwork, to have the, all the information that you need, the medication that they're on, if they're allergic to, even though the doctor's office should have that,
They don't.
they don't. And
They don't.
my mom, when I first started helping with my mom had this, like, she got it from her doctor. It was a folder, and all of their medical stuff was in that folder, and all the cards and the appointments, and it was very well organized. I have no clue what happened to that folder, but I'm remembering it now, and I think I'm going to go find it for them because it was perfect.
That's a really good segue into, I'm not going to say what's in the sticky note, but we always save that for the last. But a woman named Tia Walker put together, it's called like the Caregiver Journal. You can get it on Amazon. We're not affiliated with Amazon in any way, shape, or form. But I think this is kind of brilliant. If I knew this existed, I probably would have done it. And it's just you can list their medications, all the important numbers, copies of their Medicare card, copy of their insurance card, like all the stuff. And instead of maybe necessarily carrying it around in a huge tote bag like I did, you've got it all there in a binder, and it helps you keep appointments. Like if I knew this existed, I would have had one for every year that I had to advocate for my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first step in advocating for your parents is acknowledging they may need help. And so when did you know, Susan, that your mom needed help beyond her own care?
When she started to fall a lot, which, to be perfectly honest, brutally honest, I'm sure that was because of the drinking. She just was not, and she had dementia, so she wasn't aware of how much she was drinking. Because in order to give her portion control, I bought like these little 6-packs of wine, and I said, you get one a day. And I bought her 6-pack, and she knew, and she was like, okay, because she understood that she needed to deal with portion control. And then I went in there the next day after bringing, and there were 3 little bottles gone. I'm like, Mom, there's 3. She's like, I only had 1. But she really didn't know. And one of my dear friends, whose dad actually passed away from Alzheimer's, same thing. He was like a 1 martini guy. Like he would come home from work and have 1 martini. And then like he was forgetting that he had 1 and made another and another and another. And so that was when, and then she started to fall. And that was when I realized that she, I was worried about her falling down the stairs. I didn't want her going downstairs to do her laundry. It's just so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually I think acknowledging that sometimes, like when they start needing help doing the everyday activities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because my parents live in a multi-generational home, a lot, like I personally don't have to really worry about that. I do drive them quite a bit. And, but one of the things, like with my mom, she wasn't quite at the point where she needed like a lot of care, but she was falling. She does not have balance. I mean, we would joke that if she was ever pulled over by the police and had to do the, walk the straight line test, she would have been arrested because she can't do it. I mean, she just can't anyways. Her balance is off. And so I don't know if she was happy, but in one of the doctor's appointments, I asked if she could do PT on learning how to fall. Because when she would fall, it was just like, she wouldn't just fall great, like, oh, let me try to save myself. It was like, boom, like she would just go. And and somehow she go like, and I think it was after she broke her shoulder. And I don't remember if she tripped over her dog or something, and she just went down. And so she went to PT, and she, at the time, knew how to fall. And
But see, I didn't even
highly
know.
recommend.
That's what I find. I didn't even know that was an option. Like, I think that's brilliant. Like, I don't know. Did you know that was an option when you asked for it?
I knew that there was PT and OT for like everything,
Mhm.
because of working in special ed.
Okay.
So I knew that there were, we had students that, were, like some that had OT and PT for falling and different activities. So
Mhm.
I knew that it was available. I just didn't know if her insurance would pay for it, or if we could get, or if her doctor would approve. But her doctor knows her. It's really a family friend. And so it worked out. But just doing things like with my mother-in-law, when my husband did a surprise visit when she was living on her own, it was a shock. Like she had on clothes, but she had on her bathrobe, and it was 3 PM, but her clothes really weren't clean. The dishes, she said she was washing the dishes, but she wouldn't put them in the dishwasher because she didn't want to spend the money or waste the water. So she would do this rinse and put them in the cupboard, and they weren't clean. The food in the refrigerator was like,
oh, the food in the refrigerator.
So that, I mean, those, if these are happening, like if you're visiting your parents and everything is out of date in the refrigerator, or it just, like their clothes aren't looking well kept, that might be a sign like, okay, we need to step in.
Oh, and she would get so mad at me when I would throw out all the expired stuff. And I do have to, say that my mom was a depression kid. So she probably was like, it's still fine. I can still eat that. And I'm like, you're going to get sick. No, you can't. I was like that commercial, like expired.
Yeah. Well, and my mother has an iron stomach, so she would eat it and she probably would be fine, but my father would not. He's a little on the spleenier side of the digestive, like, ugh. But yeah. But another thing, which also is, when they don't tell the truth, and knowing when they're lying, or not even lying, but they maybe not even know.
Right.
Like your mother drinking the extra wine. I mean, she wasn't really lying. She just didn't remember.
Well, I mean, at first I thought she was lying. And then I started to put it together that she really just didn't have any idea. She's just, and maybe each consecutive little bottle of wine made that more difficult to remember. But I watched her lie to her doctor. Because she was like, she wanted me to start going to the doctor's visits with her. This started like not too long after she moved to Ohio, and she needed cataract surgery. It was a second eye needed to be done. And her doctor said, your blood pressure is too high. I'm not going to clear you for surgery until we get your blood pressure down. And she was already on a blood pressure med. And so we put her on an additional one. And she fought with him, and she's like, I'm fine. I just have white coat syndrome, which, is like your blood pressure's high. Yeah. And so finally I had to sit her down. I'm like, Mom, I know you don't want to take this medicine, but what do you want more? Do you want to see? Do you want to have clear vision and continue driving, or do you want to fight with the doctor about this medicine, because he's the only one who can clear you to get it?
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily lying to the doctor, but I saw her lie to him about countless things, about how much she drank, and about infections and just different things. Like she didn't like him, so she didn't want to cooperate with him.
And I also, I think knowing your parents and how they communicate is key, because my mother, excuse me, my mother could have her arm hanging by a fiber of her, and she'll be like, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's okay. And we go to the doctors and like, how are you feeling? I'm okay. No, you're not. You're not okay. So clearly, and my dad would be, now, I think he would admit something. Well, he'd pass out if that happened. I mean, he would just pass out. If he has a cracked thumb, he's like, oh, my thumb is so sore. It's like, and do you want to go to the doctors? No, no, it's okay. But he'll whine about it. Whereas my mom, so I think knowing, like, I know like when to step in and say, okay, dad, I think now you need to go to the doctors. Or when my mom is saying, okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, like to decipher what does okay mean, And so that's, I think, knowing your parents and how they communicate, how they tick, which that could be another whole show on its own.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. So I think we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about making those hard decisions that really nobody wants to have to make, with in care, and maybe talking about those driver licenses, which Susan, you had to, yeah. And so that's when I realized, and we will be right back. Hello, welcome back to And That's When I Realized. And I am here with my best friend, Susan. I am Leone, and we are talking about how to advocate for your aging parents. It's not a topic we really wanted, we never thought we would be talking about when we were in our 20s. Somehow we thought they were just going to live forever and everything was going to be fine. But here we are. And Susan and I both have had caring for our parents issues and struggles and challenges, and even some joys, really, watching them.
Yeah.
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 And yeah. And so once it's been established that they need help, I also want to just add in there, I think it's really important to make sure that the siblings, like your siblings and all their children and whomever, if your parents have siblings themselves, that it's an open discussion amongst everyone, that this is what's happening. I know with my grandmother had some form of dementia, and really it was really only my parents, was my dad's mom, who was taking care of her. It wasn't, and so I think sharing the burden is very nice to do.
Yeah. And, I feel for a lot of for people that I know who come from really large families, and because I've seen it work on both sides of it, where like one of my friends she's one of 9. And as they were caring for her mom towards end of life, they were all willing. They mostly all live nearby. And so they all came in and they all kind of took turns doing, the cooking or the doctor's appointments or whatever. And so it didn't feel like a heavy burden. But then the opposite holds true, where you have a large family and there are siblings who are saying, disagreeing with the choices that are being made, and, are putting up a fuss. And so that's got to be really hard. I mean, I have, like I said, I have one brother, and he was, we were always in agreement on, what was the best thing to do. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have to fight with my siblings or my aunts and uncles over the decisions that have to be made.
We have a really good friend whose parents, he was on the West Coast. His parents were on the East Coast, and his parents, I'm not sure if at this point they lived with one of his siblings or their child or not, but he had to kind of sneak his mother. His father was not able to, I think his father was in a nursing home at that time, but he had to kind of sneak his mother out of the house to take her to this camp that she loved. I mean, it was like her home, and it was a part of her. And because there was that conflict.
Mm.
I just can't know. I mean, if my brothers want to come and take my parents, they can. I'm okay. Just come do it. It's good. No.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
but I
okay.
mean, these are the things I think that, like, we were kind of talking about, like,
Mhm.
tips that you might not be expecting. You might not be expecting pushback from a sibling to, and two of you may agree and one may say no, and then what do you do?
Yeah,
And
I think having that well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, but most importantly is to also include the parent in the decision
Yes.
making. And it's because it's so easy to feel like now, like, they're the child and you need to make the decisions for them. And
Mhm.
that's not in the best interests of your elderly parent.
And exactly. I think having that conversation before it's, vitally needed, have it prior, where the parent can communicate their wishes, what they really want and why they want that.
Mhm.
Why they're okay to go to a retirement home, or why they're like, nope, I don't want to do that. And
Yeah.
hear their reasons. My mom would be happy. She would be happy any place that had people.
Right.
My dad, there's no way. My dad, he just has to be on that farm.
Mhm.
And he will probably, I hope he dies there. I hope it's not in a hospital or someplace different. I hope it's there because that's truly where he feels the most at peace.
Mhm.
And my mom,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, like, I realized my mom wanted to, so when we moved my mom to Ohio, she really wanted to have her own place. Like, we looked at some really awesome brand new retirement communities, assisted living communities. And she was like, no, I really, she really wanted her own place. So we agreed. But then as she got more and more frail and dementia kind of got worse, she got more and more isolated. And I realized that her living alone was the worst thing that I could do for her, or we could do for her, and that she needed to have a social life. She needed to be around people. She needed to, eat dinner with people. Like, she ate dinner with us really often, but still it wasn't every night. And I remember, like, my mom would live and breathe just to watch TV all day long when she was in her townhouse. And when we moved her into the assisted living community, she was never in her room. She was in the common area,
Mhm.
always participating in something, never watch TV unless it was, like, at night to fall asleep or whatever. So socialization is so important.
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm going to say yes. Like for my mother, 100%. My mother's a social butterfly. She talks to everyone, and she wants to make a contact with them. My dad, he's social, but it's not that same, like, he doesn't really care. I mean, I don't want to say he doesn't care about people. He's just, I think he would be more interested in talking to the cows and his chickens and the goats. And
But what if he were entirely living alone? What if it
oh,
was
he could not live alone.
okay?
He
Yeah.
could
I mean,
not.
I just
No,
don't think he'd be happy if it were just him. And
no. He likes, I mean, because it's a very active household, that makes it that's perfect. If they were not living with my brother, or they were not living together, it would be a completely different. It's a situation I would not want to look forward to planning. And like with my mother-in-law, we had to move her from her condo to an assisted living, kicking and screaming. She did not want to go. She hated it. It was, and she knew that was, it. The only thing I can equate it to is Dan and I took this amazing trip, and I just happened to wake up at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And do you remember when the hotels used to, like many years ago, they would slip your bill under the door on the last day? Okay. And I was awake. Either that woke me up or I was awake, but I heard that slip of paper go under the door. And I was like, oh, our trip is ending. It's, like in so many hours, we're checking out of this hotel and making our way back home. And I remember when my mother-in-law was moving out of her condo, seeing, I'm thinking, okay, that's how even though it's like two completely different things, that's kind of like, oh, okay, this is the end.
Yeah.
And so it was hard. She had to go. And unfortunately she was not happy there, but she was safe.
Yeah. That's a big trade-off. Yeah. There were times when my mom was not happy and she's like, you've got to get me out of here. I'm like, you need more care than I can provide for you. And I need you to be safe and I need you to have round the clock nursing care. And I can't do that for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Now there is in-home care.
Yeah. But depending on what you can afford or what, like if we had long-term care insurance for my mom, that was great. I recommend it. Like Phil and I, we have long-term care insurance. We were already paying for it because we saw how great it was to have it in place for my mom. It doesn't necessarily meet everybody's financial situation. It's ideal if you can do that.
Yeah.
And then you got to find somebody that you trust. That's the next one.
Well, that's another whole thing. And luckily right now at the stage of my parents and where I'm at, it's kind of a sweet deal for them. I don't know about my brother and sister-in-law, but it's a sweet deal. Yeah. But
because it's expensive. It is expensive. And that's why we knew my mom would not have been able to afford it. So we actually took out the long-term care insurance policy. We were paying for that. Just because we knew that, at some point she was probably going to need more care than we could provide.
Right.
And it was, yes, it was expensive, especially because we got it for her much later in life. Like if you start getting it now in your 50s, if you start paying for it now, it's cheap. And then it does add up over time, but your premiums, I think, stay fairly, reasonable if you start when you're young.
Right. Yeah.
When you're 58. No, I was probably 55 when we started our long-term care. Anyway, I know we're coming up on a break, but when we come back, I definitely want to talk about, have you had the end of life discussion with your parents? Like what kind of funeral, like how are we doing this? Because these are discussions that need to be had long before you are in a crisis situation.
And also that, do you want to be on life support? Do you not want to be on? Yeah. Right. All those things before it happens, obviously. So I think we'll take a break and we will come back and discuss probably the hardest topics on caring for your parents. But if you do it, I think keeping their wishes and what they truly want, then I think you leave with a sense of peace as they do. So anyways, we will be right back. Oh my heavens, Susan, I can't do this. And that's when I realized, and we'll be right back. Hello, welcome back to, and that's when I realized, the truth and comedy of midlife. I'm Leone Dyer. What?
I said comedy.
Yeah. Oh my, yeah. I'm Leone Dyer and I'm here with Susan Dolci, and we are talking about those really hard topics like that we've talked about on our Friday Zoom calls, and that is caring and advocating for our aging parents. And Susan and I have both been we've laughed and we've cried and we've discussed the frustration that we have had and the triumphs of caring for our parents. But
I mean, because it really is. I was in a small faith community in Cincinnati, and there was one of the women in my group didn't get the opportunity to participate in the end of life care for, I think it was her mother and her father.
Mhm.
And she really gave me a huge perspective shift when she said that she really felt like she missed out. That it was what an amazing opportunity and gift to be able to, to spend that time with your parents and to, usher them into, the next part of their life. And that was
transition.
the
Yeah.
transition. And that was a real eye opener for me because I was looking at it as this huge burden and I was resentful and my
Mhm.
mom was being very passive aggressive. And when she said that, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this really is a gift. It's hard, but it really truly is a gift.
Yeah. And you were doing it alone.
I was doing it alone.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
my husband supported me, but I mean, as far as like
but-
siblings, I was doing it alone.
right. And so going back to the beginning of the show, if you take nothing from this show at all, the one thing is have a team, have a network of people to support you and your parents or parents, whichever it may be. I do want to, two things I want to tap into before we end the show. One is that end of life conversation, which is so important to have. And two, self-care for the person who is caring for the parents.
So have you had
So-
the funeral discussion with your parents?
I've
Or like,
had
like
bits-
the end of life or like, do you want to be like, man, when I had to sign the DNR for my mom, I mean, that was the hardest thing I've ever done.
What's DNR?
Do not resuscitate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know if I'm trying to think if my parents have that. I don't think, I know my mother-in-law did not. I know my mother-in-law was like, no, this is it. I just don't, unplug me, let me go. I know, yeah, I don't know about my parents. I'm going to ask them that. I don't know. Good question. I should know that. I do know, like, as far as like funeral arrangements, I do know who they want to. I kind of know bits and pieces enough that, we could put it together and they would be very happy with our, so yeah, we have had that conversation.
Well, so like my dad was so adamant about not wanting any sort of a funeral that he paid for his own cremation before he died, before he was even sick. He paid for his own cremation. Didn't know that was a thing. You can do that through the Crematorium Society. And
I didn't either.
But I said, well, Dad, I was kind of being feisty because my dad was being feisty. But I said, you can do whatever you want, but funerals are for the people left behind. Funerals are for the grieving. So you can't stop us from doing whatever we want to do to find, to share in our grief and to find closure. So if we're going to get together and have, go out to lunch or do whatever we're going to do, you can't stop us. And he did not like that.
Yeah.
And so then he went from no funeral, and he'd paid for his own cremation, which he still did, however, but then he went to planning the entire thing and to who was giving what eulogy and about what topic and who, like where we were going to go eat lunch, where if we were going to do it, he had to micromanage every single aspect of it.
Yeah,
So
no. My parents aren't there. My mom might, maybe if we invited her to do that, she might have the whole thing written and planned. But no, that's just, I think that's but because it was easy, I mean, so far it's been easy. Those conversations may be difficult with other siblings. My brother, my youngest brother, does not even want to talk about, while he knows it's going to happen. If we talk about, like, what are we going to do with dad when mom dies?
Right.
And he, nope, not going to talk. Nope. And he'll hang up. Like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Or what are we going to do with mom? Well, we know, I mean, we'll send mom off somewhere. She'll love it. She probably won't know where she's going, but she'll just go and love it. It's okay. But yeah. And having those conversations. I think self-care, before we end, self-care, for the person who is caring, like you did it, you had your husband, but it's a lot of pressure, and it takes a lot from you to care for your parent.
Yeah, it does, because I mean, we want them to be happy, right? We want them to still have dignity and feel like they are an adult participating in the decision making, and that, like, when you go into the doctor's office and and the doctor's asking you the questions instead of your parent, and like, well, they're really the patient here, not me. I will fill in the missing parts that she can't provide, but to do it and still give them a sense of self-worth and dignity, and that they still have some self-agency in how this end of life care plays out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
they are still right. They are still a human on this journey.
And they're still adults, even though.
And they're still, yep. Even though they may act like a child most of the time at this point. I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how can you, what does the self-care look like? And it's really just whatever feeds your soul, I say, like however you can find a few minutes to take care of yourself, whether it's, a hot bath or a walk, or it doesn't have to be grand. It just needs to be.
Yep. And again, going back, have that team, have a plan, have that conversation. Well, have the conversation first, form a plan, have a team, and know that this is the process.
So I love today's sticky note also because it's by that woman, Tia Walker, that I said has this great journal. Again, we're not affiliated with this in any way with Amazon, but she's got a great caregiver journal. If you are caring for a parent, go check it out. It's called the Caregiver Journal. Her name is Tia Walker. And the sticky note is?
This sticky note, this is a sweet one. Caregiving calls us to lean into love in ways we didn't know possible. And that is Tia Walker.
It's true. I mean, it really does. It really does bring, I learned so much more compassion.
Yes.
By taking care of my mom and my dad, but mostly my mom.
Yeah. And I've actually learned a lot about my parents. Like, they're not like all the things that make them tick and their triggers, but their true self. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm tapping into that soul that popped in here 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. So do you want to take us out?
I'll take us out.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everybody. You're listening to, and that's when I realized this has been a really heavy, hard-hitting show. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you took some notes. Remember, age is just the number of years the world has been enjoying you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for being here with us today on And That's When I Realized. We are here to shed some light on the misconceptions around midlife by sharing real-life stories and a fresh perspective.
Look, we know it's not easy, but change is constant and inevitable. Let's explore what it means to move through challenges with a dose of humor and embrace each challenge, each new discovery with a higher sense of understanding. We hope you heard something today that made you laugh and recognize the truth and comedy of midlife. See you next time.